It's no secret that the wealthy, especially most famously Bill Gates, are gobbling up farmland right now, all across the nation. Now, to understand why, we have to look at the economic conditions that are influencing these decisions, the people with lots of money buying up farmland. And once you understand the reason why big money is entering plays like this, it might make sense to get on the right side of the fence and get some farmland of your own. And just in case you think that's out of reach, don't worry, at the end of this video, we're going to look at just a couple of ways that it's very, very easy to get in on this play with a very small amount of money. Your name doesn't have to be included in the list of people who were once or currently the richest man in the world. Ready? Let's dive in. For decades, the United States has had a structural trade deficit. When I say trade deficit, I'm talking about the trade deficit, not the budget deficit. For those of you who aren't aware of the difference, a budget deficit is when the government itself has more expenses than income. So let's say they bring out, $1 trillion worth of taxes, but they spend $2 trillion. That's a budget deficit. Just like if you brought in, $100,000 for your annual income, but you spent $200,000, you'd be in the ranks of the United States government budget deficit. That's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about the trade deficit. The trade deficit or surplus is when you look at the amount of stuff that a country imports versus exports. Basically, the amount of stuff that we make versus the stuff that we buy, that other people make for us. Now, usually you'd think something like this can't go on forever, right? Because if all we're doing is constantly just buying stuff from other countries, eventually we're going to run out of money if we're not also selling at least that much worth of other stuff to other countries. But the fact that the United States is the one in control of the dollar, and the entire world uses the dollar as the reserve currency, puts the United States at an unfair advantage where we, right now, and for the last couple decades, we don't really have to produce anything to sell. All we have to do is print more dollars, send that out to the rest of the world in exchange for stuff. We don't have to have a corresponding amount of stuff we're simultaneously making and selling out to the rest of the world. Now, this seems convenient, right? Because what's the cost of making a dollar? Nothing. We could technically make as many dollars as we want and it wouldn't cost us anything, especially today's day and age when it's just digital. So where's the limitation in this? The limitation comes in the rest of the world. Because right now, the rest of the world is kind of okay with saying, we'll accept your dollars and we'll send you real actual stuff. That's great for us. And then they use those dollars and they, transact and those dollars circulate around the world. But recently, this trend has been reversing. Over the last 10 years or so since the financial crisis, the rest of the world has been de-dollarizing, because they recognized the United States can't stop printing. And when you print money, when you put more money into a system, it dilutes the purchasing power of all the previously existing money that's in the system. So the world for the last 10 years and going forward is on a slow path to slowly reduce their reliance on and dependence on the dollar, so that they, at some point, if they want to, they can just say no to America. Hey, we don't want to accept dollars for our materials. We don't want to accept dollars for our food. If you want to buy something from us, you have to give us something other than dollars, because we don't want those dollars anymore. Now, here's where the big problem is. The United States, like I said, for decades has run a deficit. We don't make anything that we buy. We buy it from the rest of the world. So if the rest of the world is at some point going to say, we don't want to accept dollars anymore, maybe we'll accept euros, or maybe we'll accept yen, or maybe we'll accept gold, or maybe we'll accept Bitcoin, or whatever it is, America doesn't produce anything. So the only way for us to get our hands on other forms of currency then is to make something and sell it to somebody who can give us that currency. But we don't make anything ourselves. Now, we don't necessarily need other currency to buy that stuff from the rest of the world. We could just make it ourselves. We don't need to buy all the food and all the stuff from the rest of the world, but that would depend on us actually just making it all ourselves. And again, like I said, we don't make any of our own stuff. We buy it from the rest of the world. This means that at that point, and increasingly over time, it's not going to be like a light switch moment where it goes on or off and happens all at once. It's a gradual, maybe a couple of years or maybe even longer process. But as we approach that point, that means that inside the United States, any part of our economy that is productive, any amount of food that we do produce, any amount of stuff that we actually do make, becomes exponentially more valuable, because all of a sudden we can't get it from everywhere else anymore, so the supply goes down. The only place that we can get it is if we can make it ourselves, because the farm down the street will accept dollars because they're mandated to by the United States government at point of gun. This means that American farmland and other things that produce real goods become wildly valuable. And this isn't something new in history. This has happened many times before. One of the most well-known times where something like this has happened was the Weimar Republic in Germany. As they printed more and more money to pay for things, there was widespread poverty. Things got so expensive that it priced the everyday person out of being able to afford basic necessities. Every day, basic necessities were increasing in price. When it gets to that point, the basic necessities become the most valuable because you're no longer going for luxuries, you're going for survival. So poverty was rampant, even though paper currency was innumerably abundant. It was worthless. But this is important. Widespread poverty, but not universal poverty. There were some people that got very rich, and most of these were farmers. That's right, farmers. It turns out that when everybody's going for survival and everybody has been priced out of all of the basic necessities, the people who actually have things that produce the things that people need to live, like eggs and milk and cheese and meat, those are going to be the people who still have something to sell. And as prices go up, the prices of the stuff that they're selling goes up. Farmers were the only ones, or some of the only ones, who had possessions that produced anything of real value. So every day they sold their eggs and sold them for more and more, and sold their milk and cheese and meat for more and more. They got very wealthy because of it. Now, needless to say, this caused a lot of jealousy in other people, and ultimately dynamics like this led to breeding what happened that led up to World War II, the internal cultural hatred, all of that. But people felt taken advantage of, and when they went to these farmers and they asked them, hey, you're getting rich off of us and we're all, in poverty, what are you doing with all this money? They said, paying off our mortgages. So just as a side note, there was a deleveraging because of the inflation. All the money that entered the system wiped out the debt. And the people who had real assets got very wealthy because of it. When the broad money supply, the amount of money that's actually in circulation, increases at the rate that it's increasing at today, which in America is the most we've seen it increase since World War II, the result is broad spikes in the general level of prices and widespread poverty. And these things usually only take a couple of years to work themselves out. But again, like I said, not everybody gets poor. The people who own the assets and the real goods that are actually productive and produce real things get very rich. Farms become very valuable. Land and real estate become very valuable. Water becomes very valuable. Commodities become very valuable. And this is why the rich, most famously right now, Bill Gates, are scooping up, gobbling up, swallowing up farmland like they can't get enough of it. But don't be scared. Knowledge is power. And if you see what's coming and you see big money, smart people moving into areas, you can follow them. Get on the right side of the fence. Very easy for, and very low barrier of entry for, to get access to some of these things. Number one, buy an acre. Put a cow on it. That way you're not reliant on the mega farms. You can't buy an acre, buy a half an acre, get a couple of goats. If you can't do that, get a couple of chickens. You need a very small area to have a couple of chickens. A baby chick is like 15 cents. If you don't want to do anything physical and you still want to play off of this, invest in an ETF, like an agriculture ETF. DBA is a good example of an agriculture ETF. You want to invest in water, invest in an ETF like CGW. Very easy to get exposure to some of these things. If you want to invest in commodities, get an ETF like PDBC. If you know history, you see the big money, you see the smart people moving one direction, you can make an educated decision for yourself, and with very little effort and very little money, you can expose yourself to the same types of things. Very low barrier of entry here. Hedge yourself against an uncertain future, and possibly, if we do experience hyperinflation here, some of these things could make you very rich. As always, I really appreciate you guys. Have a good day.